Welcome back, everybody, to His Heartbeat. Great to be with you again. And I have another wonderful guest, Laura Lynn, who sounds like she's from the South, but she's not. Laura Lynn Morrissey, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, she's freezing up in the north, and I'm not. But
You
we're
lucky
both
duck.
in warm homes and happy to be with everybody. Hopefully, most of you are warm today, I'm sure, this time of year. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Laura Lynn, like where you're from and a little bit of your background.
Certainly. Well, I am originally from the East Coast. I'm from Boston, Mass. And I grew up in and around Boston. My, I basically, I grew up, my parents are divorced. I grew up primarily with my mom, who spent a lot of time ill. And, I talk about becoming a caregiver at 7 years old, which really
Mhm.
was a formidable part of my childhood and into my adulthood, which has impacted my college decisions, my career decisions, and ultimately the business that am in now. So I went to UMass Amherst. I studied political science, but decided I didn't want to become an attorney. And I went into financial services. So I worked on Wall Street for 20 years and then wanted to recommit myself to home care and health care. So I saw folks that were aging. My mom was aging. She had home care in the house, and things weren't going as well as they could. And I saw an opportunity for me to really make an impact and to better serve my community. And so I bought a home care company, and then I wasn't busy enough. I bought another one, and I grew that company to over 200 caregivers. And I really, it was an interesting journey for me moving from financial services and the lifestyle that I had into home care, where I became immersed in working with caregivers from all over the world, women of color who were committed to caring for others. It was their life's work to care for others. And it really showed me another, just another dimension that I really am proud of and the work that I did. So I did that for several years and I sold that company and decided, there's an awful lot of advocacy left in me. And I've learned a lot about how to age well. And I'm 60 myself. So a lot of the things I talk about, I'm trying desperately to do myself. And so I started Silver Savvy. I started Silver Savvy almost 2 years ago now, and it's part of that was becoming certified in aging as an aging specialist. I'm a certified fitness trainer, nutritionist. I'm also a certified dementia practitioner, which was part of my home care certifications. But what I do now is I provide advocacy for those of us who are aging. It can be, elder services. We need an awful lot of advocacy in this world, and it's really teaching people the 7 techniques of aging well and helping them develop a roadmap to execute that journey better than what they would do without a roadmap. So many of us, we know what retirement services is, we know what retirement planning is, we know we have to have a certain amount of money when we retire. And we also know what estate planning is, and we know that we should have a will and all these other documents in place. But what do we do in between all of that and making sure that we're living our best informed life, especially since we're living so much longer than ever before? And so my job is to help people really understand what are the things they need to think about. And so as you're planning your wedding and your college education for your kids and, you know, all of the other things that we spend our time planning on, we need to really think about how do we age well and make sure that we're checking all of those boxes so that we're, living more fully. So that's what I've been doing lately.
Wow, it's really cool when you think about our journeys and how we go through all these different experiences, and when we move into the what should little more than second half of our life, I find a lot of us, me included, we start to see God lead us to pull together all those pieces. I mean, I found the same thing. I started out in physical education and, moved on to the mission field and then got counseling background and, all these things. And now it's all formed into this new nonprofit that I have, Crown of Beauty International. And you're the same, right? You're taking all these pieces from your life and now you're
I
living it
believe,
out in a
I
special way.
believe, I believe that, and I believe that, I saw when I was in the financial services world, I was very blessed. I did very well. And I was happy that, obviously some of the thing, my hard work, but I was also very driven. I felt very guided. I had a very strong North Star. Had a very strong sense of self, and I had a very strong belief in God. And I think that got me through the trauma of growing up in a very crazy home. It kept me very grounded. I was honestly, when my friends were off, drinking and doing whatever they do as kids, I was in church several times a week. And yet it was interesting. Nobody made fun of me. I went to parties just like my friends, but I didn't drink. And because I was very confident in who I was. I wasn't somebody that, I believe that I could still live my life and be a very positive influence and not necessarily have to make decisions to go and follow the crowd. I could follow my own beliefs and my own convictions. And even in my own home, my mother and father didn't necessarily have the same beliefs that I did. They would drive me to church and then they would pick me up, you know,
Gosh.
and and that's okay. It didn't stop me from believing what I felt was important. So, I'm a big fan of God. I'm a big fan of Jesus. I believe I am where I am because of them. Every day I'm grateful, and so that's part of the work that I do. Part of living your life well is having a very strong connection to, whether it's, for some of us who may not believe necessarily in God. I'm not necessarily going to look down on you, but I'm going to say you have to have some level of spiritual connection to feel like you are living your full life. And for me, God and Jesus is very, very important. I just started, I don't know if your listeners are listening to Hallow, but that is a huge part of my morning meditation. I downloaded that app, and every day I listen to various people talk about, Jesus's journey. And I think it's pretty cool that we have a mainstream app that has people like Gwen Stefani and some of these, stars who never spoke about their religious convictions and their belief in Jesus and God, and yet here they are talking about how important it is and why they've done as well as they've done in their life and all the things that they're doing to give back. So, um,
Is
yeah,
that
I'm
is that an app or it's a
yes,
podcast?
Hallow.
How do you
It's
spell
a
that?
Hallow. Hallow.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
my husband and I, every morning we listen to 25 minutes. It's prayer. There's some education component. So they talk about the various saints and other folks that live through, difficulties, and, spread the good word and live their lives in a way that we all should emulate. And it's really cool because it really sets my morning up. And and it's really fun to have, all of these different people talk about their experiences and how they found Jesus. And so
That's
that's
cool.
definitely something that's part of my day to day.
That's awesome. So I want to ask you a question. I know that we're all so different as we get older, and some people start feeling like, oh, I'm in the latter part of my life when they're in their 40s, and some people in their 50s, and some not until their 70s or 80s. Do you find that? And what do you think is the typical age that people start thinking um, about? Okay, I'm in my older years and how can I set myself up for health and, that kind of your services basically.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that. When I, coming into my career in financial services, I dealt with a certain age group, mostly younger. And as I moved into home care, you sort of see what the fruits of that labor looks like. People that are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. So I was in my 50s when I bought the home care companies, and I was living my life very differently than I am now as far as taking care of myself and taking care of other areas of my life. So I would say right now, men and women in their 50s and 60s realize, wait a minute, I have a feeling I'm not doing everything I need to do to age well. I They usually experience something with a loved one or a parent, since most of us now have aging parents. So the best client I've had so far is the one that has seen what it looks like with their mom and dad or uncle or aunt or whatever, and they're like, I don't want to live like that. What do I need to do to get out of that trajectory? And others, and some, but my goal is to back that up and have this conversation a lot earlier. So when I was in financial services, we used to talk about people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s savings. Now we're trying to get into you know kids in their teens and early 20s, because the earlier you get that mindset going, the better the practices are that will enable them to save earlier and better and be able to grow their retirement savings. So it's the same thing with aging. If I was able to share, and I'm not one of, I know there's more and more people out there, but they're not quite doing what I'm doing. A lot of these life care planning folks, they come in when there's an emergency. Maybe somebody fell, or maybe there's a
Mm.
sickness, and all of a sudden all these bells go off. Yikes, we don't know what we should do. I want to back that up and have that conversation a lot earlier, when you have choice and when you have control, so that you can have a better outcome.
Yeah, that's great. And also, there's such a different mindset, right? Like, I think as to why they would seek you out, I think for some people, like you said, they see their parents are diabetic and they have all these issues or whatever, they're thinking about health. I think for me personally, and there's plenty of us in this camp, we're thinking, I want to be all that I can be for God right to the end. I don't want to shortchange all that he means for my life because of stupid decisions. So I wonder, like, what do you think are the motivations of people, why they turn to seek your service?
Well, I know for myself, I can talk. Let me talk about myself for a second, because I think I'm my own example. So,
Okay.
you know, I I was sitting in my office in Manhattan, and I was looking out the window one day, and I was miserable. And you could look at my life and say, "Wow, you've got everything you could ever want. Why are you so miserable?" And I had lost my connection with the church for a while. I had lost my connection with God for a little while. I had become a workaholic, and I wasn't feeling good. I didn't look good. I wasn't thinking well. All I was doing was, work, 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 trying to save the company, trying to save the employees, trying to save everybody else. I wasn't even trying to save myself. And I wasn't trying to live my life the way that I had when I was in high school and in college. And man, I felt it. So I I wanted to recommit my life in general. I love going to church. I love church. I love singing in choirs. I love doing all of the things that I believe say to God, you are doing all the right things. You are living your best life. And I was also very addicted to things. I was addicted to shopping. I was addicted to buying new cars. And I was keeping up with the Joneses, like so many of us do when we get caught up in all of that. And I literally went through a whole cleansing period in my life where I sold my houses. My husband and I said, we're not happy. Let's just start over. Because I was happier when I had almost nothing. And that's kind of weird. and and so I believe that you can be financially secure and still be connected with God. I believe that you can take good care of yourself and still be connected with God, but I don't think it's necessary for you to be chasing all of the things that someone like myself was chasing. So getting into healthcare, you see the good, the bad, the ugly. You see people living well. You see people who are living their lives that I think is wholesome, and then you see those that were like me. I was heading in that direction of, I probably would have developed dementia. I probably would have had all some sorts of chronic issues, and all of that in my mind has I've reversed all that trend, and I'm living much better and much closer to the way that I lived when I was in high school and in college. So, a lot of times people will seek my services because they're worried about dementia, they're worried about their loss of ability, mobility, they're worried about not being able to stay in their house. They're also not sure, what does it mean to age? And so they will reach out to me. Maybe they've had some issues with walking up and down the stairs. Maybe they don't feel as well. They need to become more physically fit. And so it's an opportunity for me to start to educate people on my story, because I'm living the same story that I'm actually trying to teach. And I inject as much of that as I possibly can into the work that I'm doing.
Oh, that's cool. Now you mentioned 7 techniques of living well. So
Yes.
do you have a book about this or
I don't have a book.
there? It's coming,
Um,
huh? It's coming,
yeah, I know.
Marlon.
I feel like, yeah, I feel like there might be a book in there. Um, it's funny. A couple of months ago, I was talking with someone, and they said, you should spend more time talking about, your story because it really resonates with people. And I've always been very quiet about my story. Um, and even when I get off this podcast, I'll probably be like, ah. But I think it's important that people see that um, there is a way out and there is a path forward, and you can reinvent yourself and get back. Because for me, I was already in a place I really enjoyed. I really was proud of myself and I really loved myself when I was in high school and in college. And then I lost myself for several years. And now I'm back. So when I talk about the 7 techniques of aging well, and you just mentioned it, Sue, physical wellness. So we need to think about caring for our bodies, and that includes just table stakes. It's nothing brand new here. It's eating well. It's understanding what our bodies need as we age. More protein, a lot more wholesome vegetables. Get away from all that processed food. Stay away from and all the stuff that we're hearing. That's
Mhm.
true.
Mm.
Absolutely true. So physical wellness, staying strong, staying mobile, making sure that whatever I can go on about what parts of your body need to stay strong so that you can stay safe and you can continue to live your life the very best you can. But regular movement, making sure that your home is safe, making sure that you're taking in proper nutrition. For those of us on medication, making sure that you're taking those meds. I know my husband, he still thinks he's 20. So he was diagnosed with a couple of chronic issues. And, you'd ask him, have you taken your meds? Oh, I forgot to take them for a couple of days. So really making sure that if you need to take those meds, you're taking those meds, because you want to prevent that decline before it starts. Emotional and mental well being. We saw this during COVID. So many folks were isolated in their homes. So many kids were isolated. Older adults were isolated. And we've seen the repercussions of the um, the impact to their emotional health. Mindfulness. For me, my emotional journey includes attending church on a regular basis, um, talking about my faith with others on a regular basis. I really enjoy um, being around others that are like-minded in that way. As much as I enjoy people that have different opinions than me, for my emotional health, I really enjoy being around people where we have uh, like-mindedness in our faith. Um, the third one's cognitive and and intellectual wellness. So, I am a big fan of continue to learn, and that can go to college, go back to school, continue to read, uh, be as curious as you were, be as curious as you need to be in your 60s, 70s, and 80s as you were in your, as a little kid. All of those things that you did as a kid matter even now. So stay curious. So
Yeah,
the,
can
the
I
the
add to
next,
that?
yeah,
Yeah, for me, in diving into the first one, you said physical wellness, eating well, staying strong, all that. I started reading, and there's so much out there, new stuff about health, and some really interesting books and magazines,
yes,
that I had to learn, Laura Lynn, a whole new language, literally. And I got a health coach. And when we first started, I'm like, what? What was that? I don't understand. Can you define that? There's this microbiomes and all these, words
yes,
that I
gut
was
health,
like,
yeah,
no idea what you're talking about. But that kind of overlaps with this cognitive, intentional, intellectual wellness because I feel like I'm taking a whole college course on nutrition, you know. So, and that you can
that's
do the
awesome.
same thing with the physical, if you're looking into exercise or if you look into some kind of like mindfulness, whether it's meditation of scriptures, whether it's some go yoga
Absolutely.
and whatever, but learn about it. Don't just do it, but learn about it. What is it doing to your brain and your body and what are good methods and get books on that. So there's so many things you can do without going back to college,
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I became I became a very stressed out human for a long time, and it became a way that I used it in a way that got me through a lot of the deadlines that I faced. But at the end of the day, it became a real grind on my body. So mindfulness in the morning for me is very important, and incorporating, um,
Can you
my
define
like I said,
that
when I
mindfulness?
what stress
No.
mindfulness. So it
Yes.
can be mindfulness is quieting the mind, and focusing on um, something that is positive that will help you to fight back some of the negative thoughts that come into your mind. Stress is something for me that I always have to fight with and I have to manage. So you talk about bio feedback. So when somebody's mind is racing, or if they've got a lot of negative thoughts, or not positive thoughts, and they're not filled with positivity, what happens is your heart rate is impacted, and when your heart rate is impacted over time, it can lead to various, health issues. So stress is not good for you. It's not good for your gut. It's not good for your brain. It's not good for your heart. So I began to study and get biofeedback. I would actually put on a little thing on my finger, and it would measure my heart rate when I would think about certain things. And I began to watch when I would practice mindfulness, and things that would help me calm my mind down, my heart rate would come down. And so you started off in this with this really huge imbalance of your heart
Mm.
and your mind, and then over time, as you saw your positivity, you're thinking more positive thoughts, you are in a much more positive place. Um, you saw your heart rate and your thoughts come into line, and that was one way to physically see output of what mindfulness can do for you physically. And so I can tell now when I've become very stressed out, if I have not done enough meditation, or I have not, like a couple of days I was traveling and I didn't listen to my app in the morning. And man, I just felt all discombobulated because I was my morning routine was disrupted.
Yeah.
So, you know, emotional well-being is absolutely connected to your cognitive and intellectual wellness. Something that's also really important as we get older. When we were little kids, how many of our parents would go outside and play, or you'd go to school and you'd meet new kids, and it was just what you did. You went to college, you met new kids. You've been traveling, Sue, and you must meet new people constantly. Social connection is such an important part of our health. And as we get older, it becomes a big challenge for many of us. We live alone.
Mm.
Our kids have left us, whatever. We have a change in our dynamic and our community engagement. And so I talk about ways to re-engage. For me, church is a very big part of staying engaged, staying connected, finding people of like mind, so that I feel connected. And
Yeah.
when I was in financial services, I was living all over the country. I was not connected to anybody.
Yeah. Even
And then,
helping your neighbors.
oh,
I mean, like
absolutely.
our neighborhood, we're getting a lot of young people in, but there's older people, like way older, that were here, years before me.
Yeah,
And so they're kind of connecting with each other, which is very
that's
cool.
awesome.
But there's a gal she's younger than me, I think, now about my age, and she just started having these neighborhood parties and
That's awesome.
bringing them in, and it's gotten them more connected with each other and with her.
See, that's
And then she
beautiful.
found out that I have a nonprofit. She just retired, and she's helping with fundraising. And I mean, it was amazing. I'm like, what? I was in such desperate need for help in this
Oh my
area,
goodness.
and God just provided her. I said, you're like a
Yes.
neighborhood angel for me. But
Oh,
yeah, I mean, there's people all around us. So, and
yes.
internationals, I always push for that here, right? You have immigrants who come in that their English isn't very good. Well, sit down with them and just practice English with them, or
Yes.
learn how they're cooking. They have
Oh,
amazing dishes,
they
get
do.
together and say, hey, you want to swap? So I think that it's all around us, and I agree that social connection is so important.
It is. That's awesome. I know in home care we had several countries represented, and I just some of the food was insane. So for my birthday, some of the women would bring in food from
Oh,
Jamaica, or some of the food was incredible. And I was invited. I had the opportunity to go to a couple of weddings, which were just absolutely gorgeous events, and it was just a pleasure. But
very
we got to
fun.
eat a lot of food. It was very
Yeah,
good.
cool.
Um, but exactly, so the whole community connected. That's you live in an amazing community. I think that's exactly what you'd hope would happen when you have that a little bit of turnover and you have that new energy come in, that they embrace folks that have been in the neighborhood for a while, because it does mean something. And I think, I talk to clients about, all those skills that you had that you just assumed when you were a kid. You have to kind of dust those off, and you have to begin to say, how do I make new friends? And it's hard because you're used to kind of living in your world the way that you had it, and going back to something that actually is not necessarily new, but something you didn't do for a while. It's hard. And so I provide, emotional support, and just say, you can do it, and let's talk more about it as you make those little baby steps. And so, 5, 6, and 7 are financial and legal readiness, making sure that you understand, you know um, the impact of us aging on your financial plan. And as I said, I don't believe you need a lot in this world, but it's always a lot better if you feel like you have enough financially to live your life in a way that you can provide for yourself and for others. Environmental and home safety. So we all 90% of us want to live in our home as we age. 10% of our homes aren't really capable of supporting us in that way. I know I saw that in my business. I would come in so many times after someone had slipped on the stairs, or otherwise was living on the first floor without the right amenities because they weren't able to get back upstairs. And then purpose and legacy. So, I feel as though, you come back around, and this was a question you had asked earlier, you know, what is our life all about, and what are you at the end, and what is it that you want to leave behind, and how do you really truly want to be remembered, and what is it that you want to make sure people think of you when you're no longer here. So um
Yeah,
yeah, so
purpose is
that's
so important.
it is.
I can remember my mom, she, got to that point. She's still living at home, but she had to drop out of, she's on the neighborhood, one of these neighborhood groups that help the neighborhood. And she had to drop out of that. And she's like, "Oh, I don't know what my purpose is." And I was like, "Mom,
Yeah.
you're a prayer warrior." She's got this long prayer list, and she really supports our ministry
Oh,
prayerfully when we go on trips and in between, and praying for our family. And I think that really helped her to realize, like, yeah, this, to really move into this, you know what I mean? Um, Maybe that would have been a good time for me to get her a book on prayer or something. I don't know, but she was just good at it. Maybe she'd find that interesting. I don't know, but and then
that's
even
awesome. I think that that's really important. It's like, it's not that her purpose changed, it's not that her purpose ended, it evolved a little bit. She just
yeah,
had to be reminded.
yeah, it shifts, and I think right up to the end, she was always the one who, when the caregivers came in, was like so appreciative and thank
Oh,
you. And
they must have
I
loved
used to
caring
be
for
a
her.
nurse, and it's not easy, and you're so good at it. And they loved going to her.
I
It's like,
bet.
I said, Mom, this is your purpose, to bring light and thankfulness and gratitude and joy into this place, because it is hard for these people. Most people
It
just
is.
moan and complain and are mean to them. And
Yes,
you're
they
like
are.
this bright light. And I think that's what God has for you at
Yes.
this ending of your life.
Yeah, she made people feel like what they were doing mattered, and
Hmm.
she didn't. I'm sure a lot of them had come from different countries, and they probably had English issues, and yeah, that was a lot of, and to me, just providing dignity, showing some dignity, because the job is super hard. I learned my firsthand, and I often would go out caring for others. People wouldn't know that it was my company. I didn't think it was important that people really knew that. And I would go out and care for people. And some of my caregivers didn't always know it was me, that I'm the owner.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm right beside you caring for somebody who's very sick. Um, and I think at the end of the day, it's important to stay in touch with what really matters, and that is helping others and making sure that you look around. There's always going to be somebody that needs help, and to the extent that I can provide that help, you know, um, I think that that's really what my goal is. And so it's good for me to be in a community where I can do that and I'm not traveling all around where I think I get my roots start flying everywhere and
Yeah, yeah.
I don't feel as grounded.
So, yeah, so I love that you're helping people to live a healthier life and they're going to live a longer life as a result.
Yes,
And like you said, people are living longer.
they
So,
are.
when you're young, you're in your 20s, 30s, you're thinking people who are in their 60s are like ancient grandma, grandpa, and they're going to die soon or something. And then when you hit your 50s and you're like, oh, I hope
What?
that's not true. No, that can't be true. That's only 10 years from now, or you know what I mean? And then sure
Yeah.
enough, you get into your 60s and, there's this whole idea in America that used to be retirement at 65. Now
Yes.
you're supposed to wait until 66 and 9 months, or it depends on what year you're born and all that, to get full Social Security, all that kind of stuff. But um, can you talk to me a little bit about that? As people are coming up towards thinking, oh, wow, in 5 years I'm going to retire, 10 years I'm going to retire, and should I retire or shouldn't I? And what should retirement look like? Could you talk about, because I know that can be a crisis point in
It
people's
is. Yeah.
lives because they don't prepare for that change. And then
No,
they hit it
huge.
and they feel useless and meaningless and bored and miserable. Or they just never retire and they get exhausted. I don't know.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to purpose. So, I think, uh, and I work with clients that are reaching that retirement age because there is not enough talk about the mental impact and the physical impact of no longer having all of that responsibility. And, what we do every
And
day ma-
routine, right?
matters. Yeah. And that
Yeah.
purpose matters. And I think getting in front of that 5 years or so before and start living your life in by degrees as much as you can so that in preparation for retirement it's not this big bang, because I have seen divorce, I have seen death, I have seen quality of life decline, and to your point, and then I've seen others that are incredible. And for those that are able to embrace the change and see it as a new horizon and look at it as opportunity, and then you go through these 7 things I just talked about, you're going to find that they've checked those boxes whether they knew it or not, and that they woke up, with a purpose, whatever that is, that they feel connected, that they have an understanding of what they're doing every day and why it matters. And and I think for those of us that haven't really thought through that, doing it years before so that you can put a plan in place, because it isn't, as you know, it's not about, hey, take a vacation every couple of months. It's not about, now I can play golf every day. We know that all of those things get old pretty quickly, and that we need to make sure that we have, um, you know the 3 big things, someone to love, something to do, and something to look forward to. And I think that if you don't have those, then you're susceptible to, some level of decline and an emptiness as you get older. And I think, as I said, I'm 60 years old. This is my third career. And but I am really excited that I'm balancing my career with my community service, with my commitment to, my faith. And it's a way that I wished I could have done it when I was younger. I probably could have, but I just didn't, because I just didn't have the tools or didn't recognize the importance of it. And so this is one of the reasons why I'm talking to anybody that will listen, because I think that there's going to be so many of us who are turning 65, and we are facing such an awesome opportunity if we just are aware of what that opportunity is and we grab it and put in place practices that help us to age better.
So you're saying preparation about 5 years before starting to think about what that retirement will look like.
Absolutely. From a financial standpoint, it's unwinding some of the, extraneous expenses that you're not going to need, and get used to not necessarily spending the money the way you do. Or, if you want to stay in your home, think about what modifications you need now, um, before you really need them. I mean, something as simple as, making sure the bathroom is super safe. My husband is very athletic, and he fell the other day in the tub. and he ripped everything down. He poked a huge hole in the tub. That could have been a much different outcome, and we immediately put up bars and made the bathroom safer. So there are things that you can do on an incremental level that will help you by the time you reach that retirement age, that you're already, flying into retirement with lots of with a really good plan, and you've already started the journey more or less.
Yeah, do you have a suggestion of how you decide when to retire? That can be
That's a big
hard for
huge
some
depends.
people.
Yeah, that's a big huge depends. I mean, it again, you go through, I think you have to go through what are someone's goals and what are their values. You know, I think for some, you know, they see work as a means to an end, and then when it ends, they are very excited to spend all of their time in the community or whatever it is that makes sense. So I think it's evaluating what are someone's goals ultimately in their life, and maybe they're not thinking about it. That's a way. So that's something that I would tease out of them. Um, but I think it goes back to purpose. If you feel as though, for me, my purpose will always be some level of work. I enjoy the idea of working, whether I have a little office in my house or whether I have a big office. Right now I have a studio that I go to every day. Maybe I won't always have that, but there's something about getting up, getting dressed, and coming out. And I think that will always. I had a client whose wife had dementia, and he was an attorney. He was 90 years old. His son was like, I wish he would stay home, but he would go in the office every day, and his son's like, I don't know what he does, but he's having meetings all day. And I talked to his dad. I said, why do you keep coming in? He said, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have my job. And I'm thinking, there's so much more to life. He just didn't have a plan.
Hmm.
This is the only thing he has. And that's too bad. So, but I think you have to know what your goals are. You have to know what's important to you. And I think talking with somebody who can sort of bounce off those ideas and vet them. And, because I have a lot of information that can help. Well, I didn't think of that, or I didn't think of that. You know what? I didn't think of that. And then, okay,
Yeah,
you know what? I'm solid on this goal. Therefore, this is what my retirement plan looks like. Some people aren't financially ready, unfortunately, and they are going to always have to work to some extent.
right.
Um, the
But
good news is there's so
even
many of
having
us
a
over 50 in the
change.
workforce. What's
Yeah, I
that?
was just thinking, even having a change, like maybe your retirement is that you leave this job because you're kind of wiped out from it. You've had enough,
Yes.
and you do something fun. Like I for me personally, I have a ways to go. I think, working in the mission field and working with my nonprofit, but I can step down from being executive director to doing things within the nonprofit that I really enjoy. But I tell my husband, I go, maybe once a week I'll become a dog groomer, you know, because I think this is a fun thing I've always wanted to do, or help out
That's
at
awesome.
the shelter, So I've asked him because he is planning to retire soon. Uh, so what do you think you could do that maybe would help us out a little bit financially, but would also be fun for you? So thinking ahead, I think, is
I think that's
important.
great. I think that's great, and I feel as though, the one of the little factoids, there's going to be more of us in the workforce. Folks that are older are going to be the norm, and that, businesses, and I actually talk about this in several articles I've written, businesses need to think about that, there's going to be more of us in the workforce that are over 50. Like I worked for Fidelity Investments, the average age was 42. That's going to change. And, companies need to really embrace that. And so there's that change. You can go into a lot of the retail stores and you see the change in who's working in those stores. And I like that. I'm
Why
glad.
is that? Yeah,
Well, some of it
because
is
yeah.
some folks have to work, but others decided that, you know what, I don't want to fish all day. I don't want to sit
Mm.
around all day. I want to be around people. I went to this conference called Aging 2.0 in Boston, and one of the things that we were, it's a little bit of a think tank, and we were all talking about programs that colleges. There's one college here in the Boston area, LaSalle, that has a program where folks who are retired could move onto the campus, live in dorms that are set up for older adults, but they are committed to taking classes over a certain period of time. But what they get is all of that interaction, and there's a back and forth where students get to get, they're all students, but the younger students get to interact with older folks. Because how many of us live near our grandmas and they don't? So so many generations now don't get to see their grandparents as much as they did. I mean, back in the day, my grandmother lived right down the street. We saw her constantly. We were Sunday dinner at 2, or we bring donuts after mass, and there was always, um, my grandparents were a huge part of my childhood, and that's not always the case. So this is a way to reconnect different generations and establish that respect that may be declining. Like to your point, someone who's old, maybe people look past us. Um, and so, there's an opportunity to, and we know that that happens in various other countries like Japan. There's, folks that are aging are in communities. There may be somebody, a group of women perhaps that are assigned to a group of older people and they care for them. And so there's a level of dignity there that, and that, codependency between the two generations. And I think we need more of that in this country.
Yeah, it's interesting because, when I do my conferences, when I do it in the US, I never tell my age and I always try to dress as young as possible because pe people here really respect youth.
They do.
And then when I go overseas, which is most of my conferences, I specifically mention my age because they respect age. And
That's
then
interesting.
right away, they're like, oh, I got to listen to you. You have something valuable for me. So
Wow, that's
it's
interesting.
really crazy.
Well, I'm hoping that with, the advent of, you know, 50 million people over 65, I mean, in 25 years, there'll be more people over 65 than under 18. So I'm hoping that that demographic shift enables us to strengthen some of the disconnects that we might have right now.
Yeah, yeah,
And then it's an opportunity to bring into play some of the values that I think are important
yeah.
that come from aging.
Well, Laura Lynn, this has been so fun. I feel like we
Oh,
could
thank
talk
you.
all day. So y'all can see how connecting with her can be really valuable. She has so much to bring you. So how can they get a hold of you?
Lovely. Thank you so much. Well, my email is hello@silversavvy.com. Silver Savvy, two words, but one word. And I am on Facebook, silversavvy.com. I'm sorry, Silver Savvy Aging Well. And and then, through LinkedIn. So Laura Lynn Morrissey. I am on LinkedIn as well for those of you that are on LinkedIn.
All right, yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. I learned that Savvy has two V's. Is that right? Savvy?
It does. Yeah,
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, if y'all are watching this interview, I am struggling through a flu. That's why sometimes having
you did
coughing
great.
fits. But anyway, it was such a joy and pleasure to be
Thank
with
you.
you, Laura Lynn.
It was an honor.
And
Thank you.
for those who are 50 and above, I'm sure this your ears were perked like, oh wow, okay, this is good information for me. And if you're below that, also good for you because this is you're dealing with your parents and you're probably thinking through a lot of these questions of how can you help your parents. So all right. Well, this was great time. Y'all share this with others, and I'm looking forward to be back again with y'all next week. Thanks again, Laura Lynn, for a great time together.
Thank you.